First, I'm announcing a pardon for all prior federal offenses for the simple possession of marijuana. There are thousands of people who are convicted for marijuana possession who may be denied employment, housing, or educational opportunities as a result of that conviction. My pardon will remove this burden on them. The federal government currently classifies marijuana as a Schedule I substance, the same as heroin and LSD, and more serious than fentanyl. It makes no sense. So I'm asking the Secretary of Health and Human Services and the Attorney General to initiate a process to review how marijuana is scheduled under federal law.
So apparently Biden was listening when we've said over and over for the past couple of years, just like do something, man. Like you've wanted to be president your whole life, do something with the position, and he is. And look, honestly, the past couple of months, he's been far more active. I don't know what chemical substance they've been mixing into his Raisin brand, but he's fired up, and soon you'll be able to fire up without worrying about needlessly spending time in prison. So we're gonna take the couple of different things that he's doing in turn and then debate, is this great? Is this merely good? Is this potentially bad? We're gonna be diving into it, but first, the pardons will clear everyone convicted on federal charges of simple possession since it became a crime over 50 years ago. Officials said that full data was not available, but noted that about 6,500 people were convicted of simple possession between 1992 and 2021, not counting legal permanent residents. The pardons will also affect people who were convicted under the law of the District of Columbia. That would actually be thousands, so disproportionately larger considering the geographic area that it covers. Now that is the good side, but we're not here to do PR for Biden. Let's note that there are significant limitations to this. So first of all, the pardons will not apply to people convicted of selling or distributing marijuana, just the possession side. But the move will help remove obstacles for people trying to get a job, find housing, apply to college, or get federal benefits. So there's been a lot of, attempts by the right wing to undercut this change in a way that allows them to not state clearly that they never would have done it and they still want people to be locked up for smoking marijuana, saying, well, this is only going to affect a few people who are currently in prison, which is true. But the point of it, of course, is not to spring hundreds of thousands of people from federal prisons. It's to help the many thousands who are out there in the world and having difficulty securing employment and housing and things like that. And so there's stuff to balance there. And by the way, remember, he's the president, there's a federal system that we have. He is dealing with federal crimes here. And as Princeton University professor Uday Ofer acknowledged, simple possession of marijuana is a crime almost entirely prosecuted by the states, not by the federal government. And so there are way more people that in theory could benefit if this applied to them, but it does not because they were convicted at the state level. Now, Biden is encouraging governors to follow suit and to make this sort of change at the state level. The issue with that is the states that tend to have the most draconian anti-drug policies are also states where the Republican governors there have no interest in what Joe Biden wants. And so I don't expect them to care much about this change. But acknowledging that there are other limitations that we're gonna dive into. Jessica Burbank, what do you think? Were you shocked? I mean, there was no real warning that this was going to happen other than perhaps John Fetterman talking to Biden about decriminalization when he visited over around like Labor Day or whatever.
Yeah, Fetterman put some pressure on Biden here, which is super interesting. I think we've got dank Brandon, no more dark Brandon, now it's dank Brandon. But here's the thing, Biden's administration has this weird habit of not launching policies or plans, but just like launching big ideas. Like, hey man, we're gonna pardon the people with marijuana. We're gonna look into it. I'm gonna ask them to look into expunging the records. That's all I have to say about it. It's always like, hey, we have this idea and we're looking into it and we're talking to the people about doing the thing. We don't have concrete plans, but this is the thing we wanna do. And then a few weeks later, it's like, actually, we're not gonna cancel all of that student loan debt. What's gonna happen in a few weeks? Is it gonna be like, well, we looked into it and we found out we actually can't change the schedule for marijuana, I'm sorry. So I'm not a big fan of that approach to governing. You're the president. You should come forth and say, we're giving these resources to overlook everybody's records, people who had multiple sentences, who got greater sentences for other crimes because this was on their record. There needs to be an elaborate plan to correct this. It can't just be like, hey man, I'm gonna pardon some people because Fetterman sent me a tweet. It's got to be more than that.
I am now no longer going to be able to say Joe Biden without imagining him walking up and saying, "Hey, man." But anyway, yeah, I agree. So look, here is the fun thing we're gonna do now that we always do. It happens every day on the Young Turks. We're going to get attacked by literally everybody. So on the right, they're gonna hate that we're in support of this or whatever. And then we're also gonna criticize Joe Biden. So the people that love Joe Biden are gonna get mad at us too. So I want to acknowledge, first off, I didn't expect him to do this. Not only do I mean, like, I didn't expect it to happen this week. If you had asked me Monday, will he do this as president? I would say, no, that's crazy. He's not gonna do it. He's been against marijuana his whole life. He is maybe not as bad as the reefer madness people on Fox News, but he has antiquated views about what marijuana is. Many older Americans do. They see this weed and they think things about it that make no sense to someone who consumes it on a regular basis, as well as other things. We eat an American diet, and I eat a particularly perverse version of the American diet. On any given day, marijuana is like the 10th worst thing I put in my body, and yet we're supposed to freak out about it as a nation. Maybe this will help to get rid of a little bit of that stigma, but let's talk a little bit more about where this could have gone that would have made it even better, acknowledging that I didn't expect it to happen. So obviously it's limited to the federal government. There's not much that he could do there. He can put pressure on the states. That's good. Maybe there will be some Democratic governors that will follow suit. That would be nice. Also, it very specifically, like textually, explicitly cuts out migrants, undocumented migrants, non-citizens of all sorts. It very specifically says this does not affect them. And there are many migrants right now in civil detention for marijuana related crimes. It's like jaywalking. It's a thing they can use to get you in lieu of finding something worse. And so he could have not done that very easily. I literally mean he could have not typed those words, and that would have been awesome. They didn't do it. Also, and there's no way he would do this, but we already acknowledged that it applies to people who possess the marijuana, not people who trafficked the marijuana or whatever. And I think that's dumb. Now look, if you sold marijuana and murdered people, sure, you should probably be in jail. But if all you did was sell it, and we agree as a nation that it never should have been illegal to do that in the first place, then why is it still illegal that you did it? It was an unjust policy. It was law, but it wasn't justice. The point of this sort of move is to get closer to justice. And they're only like, maybe Biden thinks of them as evil criminals, whatever, I don't know. Or maybe he's just terrified that if he were to expunge the records of those who sold marijuana as well, then Sean Hannity would literally never stop talking about it. I don't know. But if your goal is justice, then they should expunge those records too. And that would not only help a lot more people with employment and housing, all those things we're talking about, but it would also result in a lot more people ending needless, unjust prison sentences. So that would be the main thing that I would have changed, Jessica. But of course, he's not gonna do that.
Yeah, of course not. And the goal is not justice. It's as clear as day. Your logic is sound. If the goal was justice, this would be a much more elaborate plan. It would not make it illegal, and the people would be pardoned as well who are selling marijuana for the reasons you just said. The goal is not justice. The goal is to score some political points. Listen, if this was a free country, you'd be allowed to free your mind. You'd be allowed to smoke a little bit of weed, but it's not. We know that. And we know that marijuana crimes have been used to disproportionately put black and brown people in jail. When I was in high school, I sold, a little bit of weed. I'm not gonna lie. I never got in trouble for it. I never got in trouble for it. It's how I paid for my SATs, because there were like very rich white kids in my high school, and I knew them through classes I took, and I sold them weed, and that's how I ended up paying for my SAT class. It's a true story. Is it a crime? Should it have been a crime? It was a crime. It should not have been. And it's ridiculous now that we have Biden scoring political points with liberals who are like, yeah, this is great, good job, Biden. And if we make this criticism, which we are right now on the show, which is to say he should have done far more, this should not have been exclusive to people who are undocumented, and it should have gone further. There will be people that are saying, well, it's very complicated. It's really not. It's really not at all complicated to do this. And it's also not complicated for Biden to change the scheduling of marijuana. Like, you're the president of the United States. It doesn't have to be, well, I'm gonna talk to them about it and figure it out. Figure it out before you announce the plan. It's really not as complicated as these people would make it out to be. And it's crazy that Fox News is gonna be pushing some reefer madness pretty soon. And I am looking forward to it, because at this point, it's just funny.
Yeah, I mean, look, the front page of Fox News already had the reefer madness. I'm sure they had it ready to go just in case. There's a lot. As a viewer, I'm sure you frequently run up against like, wait, why is this the way things are? This seems crazy, but is anything more that thing than that people freak out about someone else 1,000 miles away that they'll never meet smoking marijuana? I mean, that is just madness. We live in an insane world. We live in a particularly crazy province of an insane world that we care about that, and that we are willing to ruin people's lives over that. That is truly crazy. And this brings us one step closer. We've been gradually taking steps as a nation. About 20 states have legalized marijuana. I'm lucky enough to live in a state where it's fully legal. And we were told for years, just as with gay marriage, that were it to be legalized, that's it, the zombies are coming. But it doesn't really seem to be doing anything bad. Like, I literally can go and buy a pound of weed. Well, that's probably too expensive. I can buy some amount of weed and get high later. And so what? Honestly, like, what difference does it make? And it ain't like it being illegal in these other states is stopping people from smoking it anyway. In every single possible way, it's the dumbest thing to continue. You should reschedule it immediately and let the Republicans cry about it. Let them broadcast to every person, especially every young person, how out of touch they are with reality. Let them do that, let them whine, let them do a court case about it or something. You be the person, Joe Biden, to stand up for the American people. You're sort of doing it now. You've started to get out of your chair. You're making the old man noise. Just fully stand up for the American people for once.
Yeah, that's the main thing we should be talking about, is that nobody's hurting people because they smoked some weed. Like, it is not a dangerous drug. People get in drunk driving accidents far more frequently than I've ever heard of anybody hurting someone because they made an accident because they were high. And that's really what we should center this around, is if you're not hurting anyone, should the government be able to step in and say, you should or should not be doing this? That's really what we should be talking about, because there are real consequences to this being criminalized. So like, if I have 2 simple possession charges, I've bailed my friends out of jail for simple possession charges. Now, if they get pulled over for speeding, if they get pulled over for speeding like 20 miles over the speed limit, they could get arrested, and they have prior charges now, and they could end up going to jail for something as frivolous as that. Because in many states, there are strike laws where if you have prior charges against you, guess what? Now you can get more prison time for super small charges like jumping the turnstiles in the subway system. It is crazy how our justice system works, and charges for weed have really no place in a system if justice is the purpose.
I agree. I don't consume as much as some people, but I've done it many times. And the worst thing that ever happened to me was, I think one time I got really high, laid down on a couch, and I put on the Between Two Ferns movie, and I kind of thought that I was going to laugh myself to death. I survived. My abs hurt the next day. That's about the worst thing, and that was legal maybe at the time, I think. Whereas when I was a little bit younger, I once made a lasagna out of many hamburgers with layers of bacon, and that was legal. You can't lock me up for that for some reason. We don't live in a just society.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.